I never thought that the sharpest betrayal of my life would come dressed in lace and pearls. The reception hall smelled of overpoured champagne, heavy roses, and too much perfume. Laughter clinked against crystal glasses as the band played a cheerful waltz no one really danced to. My son's new bride, Jessica, shimmered under the chandelier, her satin gown catching the light as though she had swallowed the moon. When she spotted me, she raised her delicate hand and waved with a sugary smile. "Come, Mama June," she sang, her voice sweet as candied lemon drops. "Sit beside us." She patted the empty chair at the bridal table, right beside her throne of tulle and vanity. I smoothed the hem of my lavender blouse, nerves prickling under my skin. My fingers still smelled faintly of the lavender soap I had used earlier, trying to calm myself before the big day. With measured steps, I approached, clutching the little silver locket I always wore, the one holding my late husband's photo. He should have been here. He would have known how to carry this moment. I bent slightly to sit. And then, like a trick from a cruel circus, she yanked the chair away. The world tilted. My knees buckled. I landed hard on the polished floor, the cold seeping through my dress and rattling up my spine. My palms burned from the slap against marble. And then came the sound, laughter. Not the soft chuckle of friends, but the raw, merciless roar of an audience enjoying a spectacle. I stared up, dazed. Jessica leaned down, her veil brushing my cheek like a mocking whisper. Her lips curled into a sneer as she hissed, "Your place is there." For a breathless second, I thought I might faint. My son, my Tyler, just stood there, stiff, eyes darting away. No hand offered, no voice raised, just silence. And then, above the cruel laughter, a sharp intake of breath. Her mother's voice cut through, trembling with recognition. "Excuse me, ma'am, is that you?" The music stumbled. The laughter died in uneasy echoes. I was still on the floor, my knees throbbing, my pride burning hotter than the wine in my throat, when every head turned toward me. I pushed myself off the floor with both hands, ignoring the pain that shot through my knees. The slick marble felt colder now, and my palms stung where they'd slapped the ground. My shoes had slipped partway off, one dangled from my toes, and the other had twisted my ankle just slightly. I could feel the bruise already blooming, dark and slow like regret. No one helped me. Guests shifted uncomfortably. A few glanced my way, then quickly back to their plates or phones, pretending to be too distracted to notice. The DJ, oblivious or perhaps just indifferent, kept the playlist rolling, some syrupy love song that didn't match the air anymore. Tyler still hadn't moved. He just stood there at the table, tall and handsome in his rented tux, jaw clenched. His hand rested on Jessica's shoulder, like she was the one who needed comforting. I watched him through a watery blur of disbelief. This was the boy I carried through chickenpox and college heartbreaks. The man I helped become someone good. I thought. I limped to the edge of the hall, past white draped tables and flickering candles. I found an empty spot near the dessert table, the smell of overripe strawberries wafting from a half-eaten cake. I gripped the edge of a chair and eased myself down, slowly, carefully. No one followed. No one apologized. But Deirdre, Jessica's mother, watched me. She hadn't laughed. She hadn't looked away. I noticed the way she clutched her pearls, like they could somehow protect her from the embarrassment hanging in the air. Her lipstick had smudged slightly at the corner of her mouth, and her eyes were wide with something that looked a lot like shame. It was a small thing, but I saw it. Not everyone was pretending, and that meant something would come of it. I didn't know what yet. But the air had shifted, and someone else had finally seen what I'd been too stubborn to admit. After the wedding, I returned home with my sore knees and sorer heart. I dropped my handbag on the entryway bench and stood there a while, staring at the framed photo of Tyler from his college graduation. He wore a crooked cap and that wide, sheepish grin of his. I remembered crying that day, not just from pride, but from sheer exhaustion. I had worked 16 years at the county library and cleaned houses on weekends to pay for that diploma. I ironed shirts late at night, my back aching, the scent of starch and sweat thick in the air. I skipped birthdays and beach trips and every, just for me, luxury. I told myself it was worth it. A mother sacrifices. A mother gives. When Tyler brought Jessica home the first time, I baked a lemon cake from scratch. I wore my best blouse and spritzed the living room with rosewater spray, the one that reminded me of spring mornings with my mother. Jessica smiled then, polite, reserved. "How quaint," she said when I showed her my little garden of potted herbs on the balcony. I thought she was just nervous. Back then, I didn't see the way she watched the condo, how she made small comments about the layout, the furniture, the potential. I chalked it up to nesting excitement. They were young, dreamy. When they got engaged, I offered the down payment for their first home as a gift. "You've earned it," I told Tyler, slipping the envelope across the table with shaking hands. He hugged me, eyes shining. I remember the smell of his aftershave, woodsy and warm, still clinging to my sweater after he left. I folded that moment into my heart. But after the ring, Jessica changed. Calls became brief. Invitations stopped. I'd show up with soup when Tyler was sick, and she'd meet me at the door, arms crossed, saying, "We're fine, June." It wasn't sudden. No, it was slow, like fog creeping in through the cracks. And I let it happen. Because I thought love meant patience. I didn't realize patience can look a lot like being erased. 3 days before the wedding, everything was still held together by pins and polish. The rehearsal dinner was at a seaside restaurant, the kind with glass railings and fancy napkin folds I never quite understood. There was the sharp scent of lemon in the air, freshly mopped floors, maybe, and the faint sting of sea salt drifting in through the open terrace doors. I wore my navy dress with the embroidered cuffs and the matching earrings I'd saved from my anniversary with Frank. I still keep them in a velvet box. Jessica was all smiles, rehearsing her perfect bride routine. But I noticed how she kept correcting the florist, rolling her eyes when I offered suggestions. Tyler laughed too hard at her jokes and ignored mine entirely. Still, I smiled through it. That's what mothers do. We smile even when the seat at the table feels colder than it should. It was near the end of the evening, after the champagne toasts and speeches, when Deirdre approached me. She wore a silk blouse in dusty rose and smelled faintly of bergamot tea. "You've done so much for Tyler," she said as she slid into the empty chair beside me. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "I hope Jessica appreciates that." I blinked, unsure whether it was a compliment or a warning. I chuckled politely. "I just want them to be happy," I said. And I meant it. Back then, I still believed that was possible. Deirdre didn't reply right away. She sipped her wine and watched the couple twirl by the bar, Jessica laughing into Tyler's chest. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she saw something I didn't. I remember that moment now, clear as pressed linen. Because when I fell at the wedding, when the chair scraped back and my dignity hit the floor, Deirdre didn't laugh. She gasped. She clutched her chest and turned a pale shade of disbelief. And she didn't look at me. She looked at her daughter. That moment has sat with me ever since. It was the way Deirdre stared, not at the embarrassment, but at the cruelty. It was the way her hand trembled when she touched her pearls, like they couldn't shield her from what she had just witnessed. She wasn't surprised that her daughter could be unkind. But she was horrified that Jessica would dare show it in front of so many. That's when I knew something else had been building. There are things you see only when the veil drops. And for Deirdre, that veil had torn. I didn't know what it meant, not yet. But for the first time in weeks, I felt the stirrings of something stronger than sadness. Not anger. Not quite. But the early edge of resolve. The morning after the wedding, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of black tea going cold in my hands. The scent of bergamot reminded me of Deirdre. Funny, the little things we notice once someone matters. My knees were swollen and stiff, the bruises blooming like violets under my skin. I hadn't slept. I just kept going over the fall, the scrape of the floor, the gasp, the laughter. Then the phone rang. "June?" It was Deirdre. Her voice was quiet, uncertain. "I hope this isn't a bad time." I almost laughed. I've had better mornings. She didn't chuckle. She sounded apologetic. I saw what Jessica did, she said, and her words dropped like stones into a still pond. It wasn't right. There was a pause. A long one. I could hear her breathing on the other end. I imagined her pacing her immaculate kitchen, pearl necklace still on, maybe holding a coffee cup with shaking hands. I don't know what to say, she added. Except, I'm sorry. For her. For all of it. That made me sit up. Apologies don't usually come from in-laws, especially not ones who hosted a wedding that turned me into a public joke. I'd like to talk, she said. Face to face. Can we meet? I hesitated. My pride was still raw, like scraped skin under too tight fabric. But there was something in her voice, something nervous, fragile. All right, I said. Let's talk. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for a week. I think there's something you need to see. Before I met with Deirdre, I called my sister Lorna. She was always the blunt one, no frosting on her words, no soft wrapping on hard truths. We'd been through every storm together, divorce, debt, raising boys alone. Her voice was like chamomile and gravel, calming, but with a bite. June, she said after I told her about the fall, you were the joke of the wedding. The mother of the groom, and they laughed at you. She said, they, not Jessica. And that's what hurt most. Because Tyler didn't laugh out loud, but he didn't stop it either. He didn't reach for me. He didn't glare at his wife. He didn't even blink. He just stood there, I whispered into the phone. Like I was a stranger. Lorna huffed, the sound sharp through the line. Then he's become one. I sat at my tiny kitchen table, rubbing a finger along the rim of my teacup. The cup had a small chip, right near the handle. I never threw it out because Frank once said it was perfectly imperfect. Funny how we hold on to broken things if they remind us of love. What would an apology even fix? I asked. It's deeper than that. Lorna didn't try to soothe me. She never did. You meet with Deirdre, she said. You listen. And you keep your eyes open. I could hear her lighting a cigarette, even though she promised to quit 5 years ago. There's something off about all this, she added. Jessica's always had that Stepford smile. But I don't trust people who smile while they're cutting you. I sighed. I just wanted to be included, Lorna. That's all. I wasn't asking for parades or speeches. Just a seat at the table. She was quiet a moment. Then, you're not the one who needs to apologize. Don't forget that. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and smoothed the hem of my cardigan. I'd chosen soft beige, nothing flashy. My hands smelled faintly of lemon from the dish soap, and I dabbed a little rosewater behind my ears. Not for Deirdre, for myself. As I reached for my purse, I touched the small silver locket resting against my chest. The one with Frank's picture inside. He would have known what to do. He would have said, go. Let the truth speak. So I went. And whatever Deirdre had to say, I was ready to hear it. We met at a cafe near the waterfront, the kind with mismatched mugs and the smell of cinnamon in the air. A gentle breeze carried in the scent of salt and warm pastries. I chose a seat by the window, where the sunlight danced on the table like it had secrets to whisper. Deirdre arrived right on time, clutching her handbag like it held something dangerous. Her blouse was pale blue, her lipstick faded. She looked tired. Not the kind of tired from a wedding, but the kind born from knowing something and not being sure what to do with it. I'm not proud of what I'm about to say, she began, cupping her tea in both hands. But I can't let this go. She slid an envelope across the table. A plain white rectangle, unassuming. I stared at it for a long moment. My fingers hesitated before touching it, like I already knew it would change everything. Inside were printed emails and screenshots. Jessica's voice, sharp and mocking, captured in text messages to a friend. She thinks she's so generous. Wait till we own everything. Put the old lady in her place, she'll fold like tissue paper. I pressed a hand to my chest, as if a locket could shield me. My tea had gone cold. The room had gone quiet. One file was a spreadsheet, color-coded, neat. The title chilled me, House After June Dies? It detailed paint swatches, renovation costs, resale estimates. And then came the worst one. A message from Jessica to Tyler. Just get her to sign over that condo. Then she's useless. I looked up at Deirdre. She wasn't crying, but her hands trembled. She never meant for you to see it, she said. I found it by accident. And I couldn't unsee it. I folded the envelope shut, carefully, as if it were made of glass. And in that moment, something inside me hardened, not with hate, but with clarity. This wasn't just betrayal. It was strategy. When I got home, I didn't take off my shoes. I just stood in the foyer, clutching that envelope like it might vanish if I looked away. The air in the condo felt thicker now, too quiet, too still. The scent of last night's chamomile still lingered in the kitchen, but it didn't comfort me like it usually did. I sat down slowly at the table, the same spot where I'd once handed Tyler the check for his down payment. The sun slanted across the floor, catching the edge of the photo frame near the bookshelf. It was us, Tyler and me, at his graduation, arms around each other, grinning like the world was ours. I couldn't bring myself to turn it face down. Not yet. I unfolded the envelope again and laid the contents out like a crime scene. Because that's what it was. Emails between Jessica and her friend, full of emojis and malice. Just wait till she sees the place after we redo it. She'll die, literally lol. Bet she still thinks we're grateful. Bless. And there, in careful lines and highlighted text, was the spreadsheet. The title alone hit me like a slap. House after June dies? Not if. Not someday. Just a blank, unfeeling after. They had picked tile patterns. Debated knocking down a wall in the kitchen. Made notes on turning the guest room, my bedroom, into an office for Jessica's startup idea. But the worst of it, the wound that went deeper than the laughter at the wedding, was that text message between Jessica and Tyler. Just get her to sign over that condo. Then she's useless. And Tyler responded, not in anger, not in disbelief, just a thumbs up. It was a casual cruelty, so careless it took my breath away. That condo, the one I was sitting in, was mine, but technically, legally, it wasn't anymore. I had put it in Tyler's name last year, believing in trust, in family. Believing that after everything I'd done, he'd protect what we had. I hadn't told anyone, not even Lorna. It was supposed to be a gesture of love. And now it was a weapon. I looked around the room. Every throw pillow, every curtain panel, every dusty teacup had been chosen with care. My care, my years, my memories, and they were already drawing blueprints on my grave. I pressed my fingers to my temples and closed my eyes. I didn't cry, I just breathed. Then, slowly, I gathered the papers, folded them neatly, and placed them back into the envelope. I stood up, smoothed my blouse, and walked to the cabinet where I kept my files. The old wooden drawer creaked as I opened it. Wills, insurance, the deed transfer, the living trust. I placed the envelope beside them. No tears, no calls, just the quiet beginning of something they would never see coming. I spent the night sorting papers. No music, no television, just the soft ticking of the old kitchen clock and the rustle of legal documents. There's a kind of clarity that comes in silence. You see what's worth saving and what was only ever clutter pretending to matter. At one point, I paused to heat water for tea, and the scent of chamomile drifted up like a small mercy. I wrapped my cardigan tighter around me, the one with the frayed sleeves and the faint scent of lavender from years of use. Frank used to call it my thinking sweater. I hadn't worn it in months. I pulled out the folder marked estate and trust. There it was, my living trust agreement. Though the condo had been signed into Tyler's name for tax purposes and with every ounce of faith I had left, I had kept a clause in place. Quietly, legally, the trust still granted me rights. I had retained the power to revoke or amend it. No one had ever asked. No one thought they needed to. That was their mistake. By morning, the bruises on my knees had darkened, but my resolve had crystallized. I didn't rage. I didn't call Lorna. I didn't even think about confronting Tyler. I simply called my lawyer. Martin Levine. A man with gentle eyes and a sharp mind. He'd handled Frank's affairs after the accident, and he'd been the one to suggest keeping a living trust in the first place. "Martin," I said calmly when he picked up, "I'd like to make some changes to my file." He didn't ask why. He just scheduled me for Thursday. That afternoon, I gathered all the emails, screenshots, and the spreadsheet. Yes, even the one titled House After June Dies, and I made copies. Then I placed the originals in a fireproof lockbox, slid it under my bed, and left it untouched. I didn't tell Lorna. I didn't even tell Deirdre. There's a quiet kind of power in knowing something no one else does. It's not revenge. It's readiness. And that's when I felt it, just the smallest flicker of control again. They thought I was fragile. They thought I'd crumble and disappear. But I was still here. And the house they were planning to redesign over my bones? It was about to slip through their fingers. A week passed. No word from Tyler. Not a text, not a call. I wasn't surprised. He'd always been conflict-averse. When he was little, he'd hide in the linen closet during thunderstorms, clutching a flashlight and a stuffed bear with one eye missing. Now, as a man, he hid behind silence. But Jessica? Oh, Jessica knew how to make an entrance. She called on a Wednesday evening. I was folding laundry, the scent of fabric softener still clinging to the towels. My phone lit up with her name, bold and bright like an unwanted headline. "Mama June," she chirped, the way people do when they're rehearsing warmth. "We've been meaning to call." I held the phone away from my ear for a second, then brought it back. "Have you?" She didn't catch the tone. Or maybe she didn't care. "Tyler and I are thinking of starting renovations on the condo," she continued. "You okay with that?" I stood still, a warm towel pressed between my fingers. The edge of it slightly damp, must have folded it too soon. "Renovations?" I repeated, slow and low. "Yeah, nothing big. Just knocking out that awful divider wall and maybe expanding the kitchen." "It's a little outdated, don't you think?" Her voice was full of honey. Poisoned honey. I forced my tone steady. "Sure," I said softly, "just let me know when you're moving in." There was a pause. Then laughter. Sharp and bright, like broken glass. "Oh no, sweetie," she said. "We're already in." Tyler made copies. My breath caught. I turned toward the front door, as if expecting to see them standing there. My condo. My walls. My home. And they had already slithered inside. The audacity of it was so surreal, I nearly laughed. Not out of humor, but out of disbelief. They didn't even think they needed to ask. They believed they owned me now. "Well," I said, carefully folding the towel in my hands, "I hope you're enjoying the place." "Oh, we are. So much space. We've already started ordering samples. Maybe you can come see it when it's all finished." I smiled. Not the polite kind. The kind you wear before a storm. "Maybe," I said. "Let's see how things unfold." She didn't notice the shift. They never do, until the ground under them begins to crack. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from worry, not from fear, but from something sharper. Something ancient. I stood in the kitchen, barefoot on cool tile, cradling a mug of lukewarm tea. The air smelled faintly of cardamom. I'd tried a new blend, but the flavor didn't sit right on my tongue. I set the cup down and stared at the small photo pinned to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a hummingbird. Frank's face smiled back at me from that grainy snapshot we took at the Grand Canyon, 27 years ago. Wind in his hair, sun in his eyes, and that grin that told me he thought I could do anything. I touched the locket around my neck, the silver warm from my skin. For too long, I'd allowed my love for Tyler to define my silence. I made myself smaller to avoid interfering. I kept my tone sweet, my gestures generous, hoping it would keep me included. Hoping Jessica would see me as family. But what had it earned me? Public humiliation, mockery, trespass, and not a word of apology. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my silence for surrender. I thought of all the nights I stayed up sewing Tyler's Halloween costumes by hand, of the peanut butter sandwiches cut just right, of the way I sat in the front row for every school play, every speech, every victory. And now they were measuring curtains in my bedroom like I was already gone. No more. I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman who had carried grief and survived. I'd paid off this condo with sacrifice and stubbornness. I'd walked through fire and come out scented with lavender, not smoke. I looked around my kitchen, small, humble, but mine. My hands brushed the countertop, where I used to knead dough with Frank on Sunday mornings. My eyes rested on the old radio, still tuned to the classical station we loved. And I said it aloud, into the empty room, "I'm done being humiliated." The sound of my own voice startled me. Strong, clear. "I won't be erased," I whispered. Not by anyone. That's when I knew. I wasn't afraid of confrontation anymore. I wasn't waiting for a change of heart or a miracle moment. I was ready, not for revenge, but for remembrance. Remembrance of who I am. Deirdre came over the next day. She brought cinnamon scones and that same weary look in her eyes. We sat at my kitchen table, the envelope between us like a ticking clock. "I want to help," she said. "I can't undo what she did. But I can help you make it right." So we began. She handed me a USB drive, every email, every text, neatly archived. But the real gem came later, when she reached into her purse and pulled out a small slip of paper. "It's from the wedding hall," she said. "I requested footage for the wedding video, but it turns out, the camera above the bridal table had caught everything. The sneer, the yank, my fall, and Tyler's still, silent form. It was all on video. I copied everything, every pixel of it. I stored it on 2 drives, one for the lawyer, one for the lockbox. Then I called Sandra Reyes. Old friend, real estate attorney, quiet as snowfall but sharp as glass. We met for coffee 2 days later. I told her everything. She read the documents, sipped her espresso, and finally said, "You still control the trust. It's yours to revoke. Legally airtight." Her smile was thin, satisfied. "You want them out?" I nodded. "Yes. But clean. No drama. Just the law." Sandra gave me a single nod. "Then let's begin." The housewarming invitation came in the form of a group text. Jessica, all sunshine and emojis, announcing, "Come celebrate our new place. Wine, hors d'oeuvres, and a tour of our condo." Our condo. They didn't send it directly to me, of course. But Deirdre did. Forwarded it with a simple note, "Might be worth attending." And so, I did. I wore my navy dress again, the same one from the rehearsal dinner. The one with the embroidered cuffs. I paired it with my grandmother's pearl brooch and a fresh spritz of rosewater. My knees still ached, but I stood tall in modest heels. I carried no purse, only a small envelope in my coat pocket. When I arrived, the door was wide open. Laughter spilled out along with the buttery scent of baked brie. I stepped inside and paused. People turned slowly, one by one, as if sensing something off. Jessica spotted me first. Her wineglass froze midair. "Well, look who decided to show up," she chirped, recovering fast. "Mama June. Everyone, Tyler's mom is here." The way she said it, I could hear the underline, she came crawling back. But I didn't crawl. I walked in with my head high, past their new rug, a hideous geometric thing, past the art prints she once called tasteful minimalism. I stopped in the center of the living room and turned to face them. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "And thank you, Jessica, for the invitation, though I know it wasn't meant for me." A few guests chuckled awkwardly. Jessica shifted in her heels. "I just wanted to bring a little housewarming gift," I continued, drawing the envelope from my coat pocket. I handed one to Jessica, one to Tyler, and I smiled. "You'll want to read those." Jessica opened hers first. I watched her eyes move left to right, and then stop. She paled. "What is this?" she hissed. Tyler glanced at his brow furrowed, and his lips parted slightly in confusion. "It's a notice," I said gently. "Effective immediately, the living trust has been revoked. You are no longer authorized to live here. You have 30 days to vacate." Someone gasped. Someone else dropped their wineglass. Jessica's voice broke. "You can't do this. This is our home." I tilted my head, just slightly. No, dear. This was my gift. You turned it into a weapon. You laughed when I fell. I looked at Tyler. You stood by. You watched. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I won't be your fool again. Jessica's hand clenched the envelope so tightly it crumpled. She turned to Tyler, her voice rising in panic. Say something, Tyler. But Tyler just stood there, the letter trembling in his hands. They had made a show of ownership. Now, I made a show of reclaiming it. With dignity, with law, and without raising my voice once. You can't do this. Jessica's voice rang through the condo, sharp and shrill, echoing off the pristine white walls she'd barely had time to decorate. Her mascara was flawless, but her composure cracked at the edges. She waved the envelope like a white flag she refused to raise. This is our home, she screamed, stepping toward me. I didn't flinch. No, I said, my voice even. This was my gift. A home earned through years of sacrifice. Given in love. And you turned it into a battlefield. Guests fluttered like birds around the room. Guests whispered, eyes darting between us. Someone near the hallway slipped out quietly. You're bitter, Jessica spat. This is about that stupid chair thing, isn't it? That wasn't even serious. I raised a hand, palm open. Stop. She froze mid-step. I would have forgiven the fall, I said, even the humiliation. I would have let the laughter pass. But I will not forgive the planning. The emails. The spreadsheet titled House After June Dies? You didn't just mock me. You mapped my erasure. Jessica's mouth fell open. And Tyler, finally, Tyler, spoke. Mom, please, he said, stepping forward, arms half raised like a man waking from a dream. Don't do this. You're overreacting. Let's talk, just the three of us. I turned toward him. My son. My boy who once held my hand crossing the street, who once whispered, don't die, Mommy, when I caught the flu. And now he stood between me and justice. Talk? I said. You've had years to talk. You had a moment, when I was on the floor and needed a hand. You didn't lift it. His shoulders sagged. The bravado fell away. I didn't know what to do, he murmured. You do now, I replied. But it's too late. Jessica threw her glass into the sink. The sound shattered, violent. And then, like lightning through the storm, Deirdre stepped forward. She had stood quietly this whole time, by the dining table, watching her daughter unravel. Enough, she snapped, her voice like a slap across the room. Enough, Jessica. Jessica turned to her in disbelief. Mom? Deirdre didn't look at her. She looked at me. I warned her, she said. I told her what I saw. I told her what she risked. And she didn't listen. There it was. The final crack. I'm sorry, June, she said again. Truly. I nodded once. Thank you for telling the truth. Then I turned toward the front door. And as I walked out, heels clicking with quiet power, I passed the dining chair that had once been yanked from beneath me. This time, no one laughed. They watched me leave, and I didn't look back. I made it halfway down the hall before I heard footsteps rushing behind me. Wait, Jessica's voice, shrill and cracking. I turned slowly. Her heels clicked wildly against the floor, her face flushed, eyes wild, not with remorse, but with fury. She lunged, one hand reaching toward my shoulder. But before she could touch me, a firm hand shot out, Deirdre's. Enough. Jessica stopped like she'd hit a wall. Deirdre stood between us, her perfectly manicured fingers spread, blocking her daughter from going any farther. I said enough, she repeated, her voice cutting through the tension like a clean blade. Jessica blinked, stunned. You're taking her side? Her? Deirdre's face softened, but her eyes were fierce. I'm taking the side of dignity. Of decency. I told you weeks ago, June deserved better. You didn't listen. And now you've lost everything. The hallway was silent. Even the guests, still gathered awkwardly in the background, didn't move. Jessica's hands fell to her sides. Her lips trembled. She ruined everything, she whispered. No, Deirdre said gently. You did. Tyler stepped out from behind them both, walking slowly toward me. His tie was askew, and he looked 10 years older than he had that morning. "Mom," he said. I said nothing. He reached out, hesitant, a boy again. "Please, just don't leave like this." I looked down at his hand. Those hands had once held mine when we crossed busy streets. They'd carried textbooks, footballs, a diploma I helped him earn. But now, they had signed away my trust. "I warned you," I said softly. I begged for kindness. "And when they laughed, you stood still." "I didn't know," he said. "No," I replied. "You didn't want to know." He blinked fast. "Can't we fix this?" I gave him the smallest of smiles. Fixing would require foundation. What we had was already hollow. Then I turned. And this time, I walked the full length of the hallway, the envelope still tucked under my arm. No one followed. No one dared. As I stepped out into the cooling evening, the scent of lavender caught in the breeze. Someone had planted a new pot near the front steps. I breathed it in, deep and sure. There was no applause, no music, just me, walking away from the wreckage of their ambition, with every inch of my grace intact. They tried to fight it, of course. Hired a lawyer, contested the revocation, claimed I had misled them. But Sandra had prepared everything with surgical precision. The trust was airtight. The eviction notice held. The condo was mine again, legally, indisputably. I sold it 6 weeks later. Moved into a smaller place down south, closer to the ocean. 1 bedroom, a sunlit balcony, and the sound of gulls in the morning. The scent of salt hangs in the curtains now. I keep chamomile in a glass jar on the counter, and every so often, I run my fingers over the worn fabric of my old cardigan. I brought it with me. Of course I did. Tyler sends the occasional text. Nothing deep. Holidays. Birthdays. Once, a photo of his dog. I don't always reply. Sometimes I just stare at the screen, remembering the way he looked at me when I was still the whole world to him. Jessica? Gone. She left him within a year. No farewell, no apology. Just a clean exit, like she was stepping out of a dress she never liked wearing. And Deirdre? We talk. Strange, isn't it? 2 women caught in the aftermath of their children's choices. We meet for coffee when she visits the coast. She sends me clippings from her garden, handwritten notes on stiff cream paper. There's a softness to her now. A quiet. Life goes on, but differently. Sometimes the people you raise become strangers. And sometimes strangers become your allies. I never wanted revenge. I wanted respect. I wanted the dignity I had earned through decades of love, labor, and sacrifice. And when I fell, publicly, painfully, I stood up not just with bruised knees, but with clear eyes. They saw an old woman. What they got was a woman with boundaries. With truth. With the law in her corner. And if you ever find yourself humiliated by those who should lift you up, remember this: you may fall once. But you stand up with power. Always.